ignite and streamline your planning for world language classes. Up your game, but work less. At least that's the hope. The purpose of this training is to start our lessons off with a spark while streamlining the planning. We're all pretty exhausted after 18 months of a pandemic, and it's still ongoing, so we need to take care of ourselves. However, we really want to engage the students and get them excited about learning languages and some of the ideas within interculturality. The takeaways from today's presentation is just ideas for learning to spark and ignite curiosity, fun, conversation, and strategies for quickly identifying lesson sparks. And tips for streamlining planning. There is no magic bullet here, but we'll see if we can come up with a few tips for that. Okay, one of the elements of hooking students, here's just a quick idea, is allowing them to tell you where they're at right now today. And the good news about this is on one side over here we have the meter of how they're feeling today, and in the classroom they can use the whiteboards and just hold it up and draw a smiley face or a frowny face for you. If you're doing it virtually, you'll see along the bottom here I've used Pear Deck for them to drag to which one of these applies to them. Both strategies work, and then you can call on some students just to confirm. However, just asking how they're feeling feels very superficial, in my opinion. And even with novice, this is a technique I would use with novice learners. I'm going to feed them some choices to explain how they're feeling today. So if you look over here, it could be vacation is coming up, they've got a passion project, the weather, their family, their activities like sports or robotics club, their friends. And, 6 is all they really need. I find that when you give this to the kids, the students who are it's still novice low, novice mid, they can at least say how they feel and then why. So they're just giving you 1 words, 2 words. And then the students who are emerging into intermediate, they may give you a more complex sentence and elaborate on this. Students who are expanding their proficiency may have a lot to say about this because it's actually something they're interested in. This activity is about their name. It's a really good opening in the beginning of the school year activity, but I actually used it in the middle of the year just because I felt like, especially with remote learning, the students were not connected to each other. So by doing this, the purpose was to build class community. Even though I was very connected to the individual students because I was doing a lot of one-on-ones, small group activities, they were not connected to each other. At that point, I invite my students to write their name in their languages. The idea, this is just an invitation to kind of open up that there's different spellings. I'll show them the different spellings of my name in different languages. Just kind of, the purpose of this is for us to see each other's names and also to introduce the idea that people have different names in different contexts and in different languages. In person, I'm going to be having each kid use an individual whiteboard, and online, if I'm doing remote, I'm going to have some kind of interaction mechanism like in Pear Deck or in Nearpod. Then I tell them the story of my name in the target language. This would be in the target language. When you take a look at this, it's probably pitched at the novice high level. There's not even any logical connectors in it other than when. We're not paying attention to verb tenses because they will get that in the context. The story of my name. When I was a child, this is me as a child. My mother is named Yola after a city in Nigeria, and Captola after a city in California. She wanted to give me a city name too. My children are also named after towns, Capri and Zinal. Then I invite them to do the story of their name on their individual whiteboard or in the interaction mechanism online. And the purpose of this is kind of to start the draft of telling the story of their name will be. And I invite them, they can do it any number of ways. They can use words, they can use drawings. If we're using Pear Deck or Nearpod, they can also just copy and paste things in there, like actual pictures. But the ultimate goal of this, at a certain point, I'm going to have them do a story of their name and talk a little bit about their learning styles and personalities on Flipgrid. And then they react to each other on Flipgrid or whatever mechanism you're doing, if you're using extempore or whatever you're using, or it could just be in the room, old school, talking to each other. At this point, this is an example of an activity I did in remote learning that I'm going to bring forward into my classroom in person too. And actually, I learned a lot of lessons last year when I was, to be fair, I was only teaching one class last year, but I did learn a lot from my students. And there are a lot of things I will bring forward that I didn't previously do. I'm going to invite you in the chat to comment what you're going to bring forward after 18 months of teaching in a pandemic. Actually, it's more than that. We're still in a pandemic. What are you bringing forward? What is something that you thought outside the box last year? I know you all did, and we want to keep. Now we get to an activity I call the specialist subject. The purpose of this activity is to generate positive interdependence in the classroom and to make each member of the class feel valued, like they have something to contribute, like they're an essential member of the class. And if they're gone, we're going to notice. As you can tell, I have a flair for the dramatic here, but it helps to kind of spark the motivation and kind of spark the imaginations of the students. So first we start, and you can do this. Again, I invite you to go ahead and comment in the YouTube comments. You can write, what's your specialist subject? And I would invite you to don't necessarily think about your specialist subject. Think about maybe you have a green thumb. You're really great at gardening. Maybe you're great at decorating. Maybe you're a fabulous home cook or pastry chef. Maybe you have a high level of social emotional intelligence. Maybe you know a lot about technology. And I'm sure there's many other things I haven't thought of. Please just think about, what is your specialist subject? What's my specialist subject? I don't know. I guess I'm going to go with my specialist subject is I'm a amateur graphic designer. I really like design. And although nobody would hire me to do that, I consider it my specialist subject. Then at that point, we use some kind of interaction technique in the class. If we're online, they would have all contributed. I would have projected what they all had. They would interact with each other, say on a collab board, some kind of post-it note situation online. If I'm in person, I'm just going to make them stand up and talk to each other. And we're going to I do some kind of four corners activity where if you have, some kind of physical skill here, some kind of technical skill here, some kind of a social emotional skill here, some kind of knowledge skill in this corner, and have the kids talk to each other. I might, if I'm teaching novices, I might have to have scaffolded this for them, handed them the language they need. But by the time they get to intermediate, they probably have a lot of the language they need. The purpose of this is for them to connect with each other and to start to see each other as essential members of the class. Because unfortunately, there's this tendency for them to see me as an essential member of the class because I'm like orchestrating everything. But I want to expand that to where it's not just all hanging on me, that we're all contributing to making the class run smoothly and for the learning to be happening every day. After that, we think about, after we find our common skills, then we're going to go to what are unique specialist skills. At this point, online, again, we'll do some kind of, some kind of posted activity, some kind of graphing activity. If we're in person, we are going to do probably a bicycle chain where the kids are lined up talking to each other, and they're going to try to identify their unique skills by talking to as many students as possible and quickly, and kind of refine those unique skills. Then we'll go ahead and have a discussion as a class, and I'll maybe chart, just go ahead and write on the board what some of the unique skills are. How will we bring our specialist skill together to launch a rocket to Mars? What can you contribute to launching a rocket to Mars? At this point, the students then say what they can do to help launch a rocket to Mars. And we have a nice discussion about, that's a great idea. You could program the navigation pattern because you are a coder, etc. And what happens naturally, again, like organically, is a deeper conversation about the skills we can contribute. And then sometimes kids will say things like, well, I can't do that because I'm distracted or I have ADHD. And it's basically a way to negotiate our interdependence. By using a fantastical situation, it's introduced kind of a spark into the mix, and also it's low stakes because we're not actually going to launch a rocket to Mars. We're going to write a graphic novel. What can you contribute? So here's where my graphic design expertise comes in. But maybe you can write. Maybe you can. Maybe you're great at telling stories. Maybe you're great at doing the marketing, etc., etc. Maybe you're a coder and can turn it into a game. Maybe you're really into sports and you could recreate an Aztec game that goes along with the graphic novel. We're building a dream house. What could you do to contribute to a dream house? These conversation sparks tend to generate meaningful conversations that can go on for a long time. And in my experience, students have a lot to say. Novice students are just going to say one word or two, but intermediate speakers begin to have a string of sentences that they can say. This is another activity with listening and speaking combined. It's a 5-word story. This is great for novices because it basically leaves out all the connecting words, and you choose 5 words that tell a story. The way this is enacted in the when you're doing it in person is you model it. You tell a 5-word story. So my 5-word story might be crocodile, dance, friends, tacos, tired. So that's my 5-word story. Then I ask on my little whiteboard here, I ask the kids to illustrate the 5-word story. I could have them write one word that resonates with them. Then I can quickly see who's understanding the story. Then you can ask your novice speakers to generate a 1-word story. They can do it in triads. They can do it in the bicycle chain. 5-word story is just a way to show novice speakers that when we focus on meaning, you can even give meaning even though you only are at the word level at novice low. If you're more advanced, you can sort of up the level by making sure that the 5-word story maybe is the 5 keywords from a reading they did to really hone in on how to summarize a reading, for example. One thing to consider is, what do all these activities have in common? When you think back to the name activity, the specialist subject activity, the 5-word activity, those are just a few ideas. They all have one thing in common. And you may see other things in common, so go ahead and put that in the chat below. What I'm seeing in common for me is that they're all very meaning-based. We're making meaning together as a class. All right, let's talk about ways to streamline planning. And the idea here is we want to up the spark while lowering the planning time. Kind of high leverage activities that are low prep. Here's some ideas. Routines. Classroom routines. If you have, say, an entry conversation routine, it's nice to use that first 2 minutes to get them to listen to something or make meaning with something, and then jump right into some kind of conversation to give the full 7 minutes for their brain to transition back into the target language. And having some kind of routine every day, it helps with the kids knowing what comes next. And they typically are low prep routines, right? Like you throw up a picture and they know they have like these 5 questions they always ask each other about the picture. It's a cultural picture, whatever your routine is, some kind of entry routine. I prefer not necessarily to do some kind of writing when they come in, just because it tends to drag. And this is when they're at their sharpest and high energy. So in the first 7 minutes, I want to put something that does 2 things, takes advantage of the high energy and gets their brains transitioned into the target language. Here's another routine. This helps to kind of keep the conversation going. It's basically call out to India Fitting, one of my teachers who shared this with me. You question, answer, then you react, because somebody, sometimes when we use a conversation scaffold, the kid's like, how are you? I'm sad. My mom is in the hospital. And then the kid doesn't react. Like, we're humans here. You need to react like a human. Here's just one line of a conversation scaffold. There's one question. This shows you how it models this keeping the conversation going. The question, the question, what are your strengths? Sorry, that's in Spanish. What are your possible answer? I'm focused. And then here they have vocabulary to choose from. I'm focused. I'm good at in making inquiries. I'm pragmatic. I'm social. I'm creative. I'm relaxed. I'm chill. I'm traditional, etc., etc. And then ways to react to that. And then it's really important that there's a follow-up question that keeps the conversation going. And then the conversation scaffold gets built out of 5 of these rows, let's say. Another great thing when you're moving into independent spontaneous speaking or interpersonal speaking is to just use the random name generator to have 2 kids model a conversation in front. Because it's random and not just cherry picking your best students, you really get a feel for where their strengths and weaknesses are with spontaneous speaking. You can also use random conversation generators. On the blog post, there'll be links to this conversation generators. You put it says names there. I'm not using it for names. I'm using it for random questions. And then you can just quickly have kids, what's your opinion of remote surgeons, or remote surgery? And then, something outlandish like that really grabs their attention. And then you do the wheel of names. You can also have the wheel of names open and call in 2 kids, or you can just, cold call 2 kids. Using the whiteboards, I think I've mentioned the whiteboards many times. There's just a few things I want to say about the whiteboards, how this can help streamline your planning. One, there's nothing to print because the kids' answers are going to come here. All you have to do is you keep the whiteboards and the dry erase markers and maybe some socks to erase or whatever stacked in your room. And then all you have to do is project some question with a quick clip art picture, and then you can get a response from the kids. While you're using the whiteboards, it's helpful to grab some from the kids and hold them up and then talk about the answer. If a student is struggling, as you walk around the room, you can quickly see what the kids are answering. If a student is struggling, You can then find a student sitting next to them and request in the target language that they help the struggling student, or just show the kid who has the right answer, or an open one right possible answer to the kid who's struggling. The other thing you can do is have the kids show their answer to each other, and then they can pair up based on what they wrote, if they wrote something similar. So the whiteboards are very tangible. You can quickly see who's engaged and who's not. And then if a student's not engaging, it makes it really simple for you to just quietly go over and request engagement. And in my experience, if you say to a student, I need to know what your specialist skill is. Please share your, tell me your specialist skill. I want to know. Most students are, 99.9 students will want to share that information with you. All right, so let's go back to our purpose. Start lessons off with a spark while streamlining planning. Give you a few ideas, just a few ideas about that. But here's an invitation to find your own spark with your lessons, so that when kids come in, you spark their ideas, you get their brains going, you hook them into the lesson. And I am very sure that you all have many ideas about how to do this. And I would love to hear in the comments what you do to spark engagement and to spark ideas.